Hello friends, welcome once again to Rick's Garage. Today we're changing the front brakes on this 2013 Chevy Malibu. This has about 93,000 miles on it, so it is indeed time for the front brakes to be done. We're going to be changing the rotor, the pads, and the caliper. So I hope you enjoy, and let's get started. As you can see, I've already jacked the wheel up off the ground. These lug nuts are 22 millimeter, but they have this chrome sleeve over them that gets distorted over the years. So they have an what's called a 22.5 millimeter socket that work a lot better on them. Let's make sure. Okay. I apologize for that, my compressor just kicked on. I'll close the door so it won't be so loud. Okay. Alright, so lug nuts are off. A lot of times these aluminum wheels get stuck. Let's see if this one will come off. And it absolutely won't budge. Alright, so take a little hammer. A hammer as small as you can possibly find, about this big. And give a little whack from the underside. Not hard, that you damage anything, but just give it a little love tap. Well, there we go. Alright, you notice I only hit on the rubber, not the rim, because I didn't want to damage the rim, but just a few little love taps with a very small hammer. Got it off. Alright, next you want to turn your wheel to the left so it gives you easier access to the bolts. Now you don't want to be turning this car too many times back and forth with the motor off. If you keep doing that, you could blow a seal on the rack. So just turn it once this way to do this side, turn it once the other way to do the other side. The first thing we're going to do is remove the brake hose, seeing as we're replacing the caliper. If we were not replacing the caliper, we would leave the brake hose attached and we would carefully hang the caliper up out of the way until we're finished. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a pan under the brake caliper, because this is going to leak like crazy. The other thing is, if you can see this, I got a little clipboard here. Don't be afraid to take notes as you're doing this job. Like what I see right off the bat is the bleeder nut is toward the top. That should always be toward the top as bubbles rise. If you were to put this reverse, this one on the other side, the other one on this side, the bleeder nut would be here and you'd never be able to bleed it. So the first thing I notice, I'm going to put my notes, is bleeder nut to the top. The other thing is the barcode on this bracket that's still here, that's also to the top. So barcode to top. So as I'm doing this job, I'm going to take little notes like this, just to be helpful for putting it back together again. When we get that off, it's going to leak brake fluid all over the place. That's why we have the pan. You see it's already started to drip. So I'm going to leave this all together. Looks like the gasket came off with the hose. That's good. I like using the old ones because the new ones you have to kind of really squash them to get them to seal. So I really like using the old ones if you can. So that's going to drip. And the next thing we're going to do is remove the caliper. Alright, I'm ready to remove the caliper. It's a 14 millimeter socket you need. I'm going to use my air ratchet. Before I do that, I wanted to show you that I have a little container for the nuts and bolts so they stay organized. And also I've got a little stool when you're working on the brakes, just to keep you comfortable. So right now we're going to pull this caliper out. Alright, and we're going to put those in our little container. Alright, all we need is a screwdriver just to pry this caliper off. There it goes, and just put it right down there. And let whatever's going to leak out of it, leak out of it. Alright, and the next thing we can do is pull out the old pads. They're kind of stuck in there. There's one out. And there's the other one out. You notice this one has a shim. So we're going to reuse that shim because the new pads did not come with that. Next I'm going to pull out the glide pins. And it came right out with the seal, what do you call it there, the boot. And pull out the other one. We're going to replace those boots. Now you notice one of these has a little clip on the end, a little rubber clip. And that came out of the bottom. So that's where our notes come into play. We're going to make a little note that the pin with the clip goes to the bottom. Next we're going to remove the caliper bracket. These are 21mm bolts. So I'm going to start out with a breaker bar to get them loose because they're really tight. And then I'll switch over to the air ratchet once I get these loose enough. The air ratchet wouldn't have enough power to get these off. Now that these have been loosened with the breaker bar, I can zap them off with the air ratchet. I apologize for the noise. Now the bracket should slip right off, and it does. As you can see, I've repositioned the camera. With the bracket out of the way, we can now remove the rotor. This particular rotor has a screw holding it in place. You have to undo that. Most of them don't. This one does. That'll help you out later on when you're putting everything back together again. To undo this screw, it's a number 30 Torx. Hopefully it won't break. If it does break, it's not a big deal because, like I say, most cars, it's really not required. It's a little added feature to help you when you're reassembling everything to hold the rotor tight to the hub. Alright, this rotor appears to be stuck. So we're going to spray a little penetrating oil around it. I'm using Croil. For my money, this is the best stuff on the market for loosening rusted stuff. You can't buy it in stores. You have to send away for it on the internet. But it is really great stuff. It's quite pricey too. This can probably cost me about $19, but it's well worth it. Alright, so let that set. I'm going to give it a few love taps in the center here. You really don't have to be careful with the rotor because we're going to replace it, but if you are indeed going to reuse the rotor, then you don't want to damage it. The other thing is be careful you don't hit any of these studs. You know, if you damage them, then it's yeah, it's a pain to replace them. All right, so it looks like it is coming off. You see all that caked on rust there. There we go, we got it off. So like I say, a little penetrating oil, a few love taps, and that's all you need. We're now ready to prepare the rotor to be installed. We need to clean it with some brake cleaner. They put a film on it to prevent rust. If you leave that on, it'll make the brakes work miserably. So So we need, and this is an outside bench that I use to do this, because this should be done in a well-ventilated area. So I don't like to spray this stuff inside the garage, because it's a little outside bench that I put together for doing stuff like this. You have to be really fussy with it. Just give it a little spray and then just wipe it down. This stuff dries quickly. Before I install the rotor, I want to hit the hub with a wire brush just to clean off any scaly rust that might be there. Anything that might cause the rotor to run out. Yeah, it looks like it's pretty good. Alright, so that's a good idea to do that. So it appears that the caliper would have to go on like, the rotor would have to go on like this to line up that screw. Let's get that started. I don't have it in far enough. It's got to be in all the way. There we go. So that'll hold the rotor in place while we're installing everything. If you didn't have that little screw, you'd have to put one of the lug nuts on to try to hold this rotor in place. You can't have the rotor flopping around when you're trying to install your brake pads. Alright. Good. Alright, we're back outside again on my bench. We're here to prepare the bracket to be reinstalled. One of the most important things is to replace these clips that the pads slide on. If you ever notice when you take your brakes apart, the inner or the outer might be worn more than the other. Sometimes they're not worn evenly. It's because it's important for the caliper to be able to slide with the pads back and forth as the brakes are applied and released. And if corrosion builds up and they can't slide properly, or your piston gets stuck, you'll notice that one of your pads will be worn more than the other. The inside might be worn more, or the outside might be worn more. So it's important to have these pads clean and lubricated. Brackets clean and lubricated. Alright, so I'm going to pull the old ones off. They should come off fairly easily. Better said than done. Here we go. Alright, that one's off. This one's off. I strongly recommend replacing these. You can see how dusty and dirty they are. Now the next thing is to take a wire brush and clean the area that they locate on. Make sure they locate nice. Get in there. That looks pretty good shape. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm going to spray a little brake cleaner on them. Yeah, that dust off there. Alright, so that's good. The other thing is to clean out the bores for your glide pins. So for that I'm going to spray some brake cleaner inside there. Get rid of all that old lubricant if it's still there. Which it doesn't look like much of it is. And I'm going to take a little bottle brush and I'm just going to go in there and clean that out. And then I'm going to let that come out. You see all that crud coming out of there? So I'm going to spray them nice and clean. Hope I'm not getting this on my camera lens. Alright, so If you look, I don't know if you can see in there, but they look really nice and shiny in there. It's good. So we'll let that dry out for a second. So to review, we've cleaned the channels that the hardware goes on, and we've cleaned out the bores for the glide pins. So next we're going to go ahead and install these clips. They're symmetrical, so they're all identical. They all only go one way. There we go, that's on nice. See, now if you didn't clean that really good, it'd be hard to get that to fit. I had one that was so bad I had to sandblast the bracket. But if you get to that point, probably better off to just replace the bracket. Some of the calipers come with a bracket, some of them don't. Alright, so the new hardware has been installed, and then I'm going to take some brake lubricant, and I'm going to take like a Q-tip type thing and smear some new brake grease. Make sure you use brake grease, not ordinary grease. You got to use brake grease. Smear that all in there. You don't want to put too much, because then it would create it like an air pocket, and the pins won't fit in there that well. That's good. That's good. Alright, so, and then we want to put the new boots on. Those just press right in. Yeah, the boot has been installed. Yeah, it's best to put the new boots. You don't want your brake grease to get out and get all over the place. So, all right. So, to review, we've cleaned the channels that these clips go in. We've installed the new clips. We've cleaned out the bores where the glide pins go, and we've put new boots on it. So, this is ready to be installed. Eventually, when we install the pads, we're going to lubricate the area where the pad slides back and forth on, but not right now, because I don't want to get it all over my fingers and get it all over the place when I'm trying to install this. So we're going to go back inside and install this bracket. We're now back inside and we're ready to install this bracket. Now it'll only go one way, but just so you don't have to fumble around with it, if you recall from our notes, the barcode was toward the top. So I got one of the nuts here, and let's get it in position and try to install it. Let's get one started first. Looks like that one's going in. Now we'll get the other one going. Looks like that one's going in. I'll grab the ratchet. I can do it without knocking the camera. Make sure that's on tight. Right now it's on loosen. Okay, so we'll go ahead and zap this in. Alright, and then I'm going to grab the breaker bar and make sure it's good and tight. Go. Alright, that's good and tight. Both sides are good and tight. I'm ready to install the inner brake pad. What I've done here, I've put a little, this inner pad comes with a shim. I wasn't able to buy one of these shims. Evidently you have to go to a dealer to get one. The local parts store did not have one. So I cleaned up the old shim as best I could. As you can see, I put a little dab of brake squeal or anti-brake squeal or brake quiet on the pad, and I'm going to install the shim. There, the shim is on. I've got that little dab of anti-squeal stuff on there. And you can see I put a little lubricant on each end of the pad where it's going to slide on the hardware. So we're ready to install it. The other thing is make sure your hands are fairly clean. You don't want to get this area contaminated. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to, let's get this out of the way. I'm going to attempt to install this, and I'm sure my head or something is in the way. There, that's in. And then I'm going to try to slide this piece over. Seems to be giving me a little bit of trouble. Because of the camera, I'm kind of blocked where I can't really see what's happening here. There we go. Alright, so I got it slid in. Alright, I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. You want things lubricated, but you don't want it lubricated to the point where you're going to get contaminants all over the rotor and on the pads themselves. So that looks pretty good. Alright, so now we're going to install the outer pad. You notice the inner pad had the wear clip. That's what they call a chirping clip. When that brakes wears down to a certain point, that'll come in contact with the rotor and begin to chirp. I've done the same thing here. I've put a little lubricant on the part of the backing that will come in contact with the hardware, so it'll glide nice and easy. And I've been careful not to contaminate the pad itself. So let's see how this goes. There we go. Alright, so that's in nicely, and any excessive lubricant I'm going to wipe off. We are ready to install the caliper. As you can see here, I've put a little dab of anti-squeal compound on the contact surface of the back side of the caliper, and I've put a little anti-squeal compound on the contact part of the piston itself. So this will help eliminate any sort of squeal that you might encounter. So this should slide over pretty easily, and it appears to. I'm going to get this screw started first. Alright, now I'm going to get the other screw started. You might have to push the glide pin in a little bit to get that in. Yeah, that's going in. Just going to tighten these right up. You can see this whole thing is turning, so I may have to get a wrench in there to stop that. That one stopped on its own, but this one here I need to put a wrench there to This is a special wrench I made. I just took an old wrench this size and I ground it down so it'll fit in there. There, that's good. Alright. So, as you can see, we've installed the caliper. The bleed nut is on top. That's very important. It even says top right here. We've used anti-squeal compound on the contact surfaces. We've well lubricated. Now, one thing we want to do to make sure that everything is sliding properly, we should see how we can slide this whole caliper back and forth very nicely, and the pads are moving. Once you bleed the brakes and pump them up, everything will be fairly tight. You won't be able to check that. But at this point here, you can see how everything is sliding really nicely. If you don't pay attention to that and you put rusty parts back on, what's going to happen is after a few miles, you're going to notice that your brakes are pulsating. What you've done is you've warped the rotor. Because this doesn't slide freely, the pads will constantly rub the rotor, overheat them, and they'll eventually warp. And if you ever wonder why you had brakes done and then within a few miles you get that pulsation, that's why. Whoever did them, if you did them yourself, you didn't pay attention to making sure everything slides back and forth nicely. So now we can go ahead and install the hose again. Make sure that the gaskets are there. I like to use the old gaskets because the new gaskets, you have to almost like crush them to get them to seat. And so the old ones, I like using them better than the new replacing it. I believe this was an 11 millimeter, so I'm going to go get an 11 millimeter socket and tighten that up. And I want to put it, don't be afraid to really tighten that down because you don't want that to leak. When you're bleeding the brakes, double check that for leaking. If it leaks, it'll be pretty obvious. The other thing is when you're turning in your old calipers, try to get the brake fluid out of them as a courtesy to the company you're returning them to. And they all come with these little plugs for this. Save the plugs and put them in your old caliper so that you're not making a big mess when you return the caliper for the core. So the brake job is essentially done. What remains, we have to bleed the brakes. I'm not going to include that in this video. There's plenty of videos out there showing you how to bleed brakes. Everybody should know how to do that. You need someone to help you with it. So I don't have anybody here to help me right now, or I would show you how to do it. But like I say, there are lots of videos to do that. The other thing is when you take these wheels off of some of these cars, especially these high performance type cars, sometimes the wheels are directional. So make sure you're putting the wheel back on, the one that came off. What I did is when I did that side, I left the wheel on that side of the car, and on this side I left the wheel on this side of the car so that I'm not upsetting that directional. I don't know if these wheels are actually directional or not, but if they are, I'm not going to have to worry about that. So that's all I've got. Just got to bleed the brakes and then check this for leaks. And the other side is the same way. Don't be afraid to take notes as you're doing the job. And I just got to get someone to help me to bleed it and put my wheels back on. So thank you for watching. I hope this video was helpful. And good luck